A Twitter whistleblower testifies before senators. He's the company's former head of security.
I'm reminded of one conversation with an executive when I said, I am confident that we have a foreign agent, and their response was, well, since we already have one, what does it matter if we have more?
China, one of Twitter's largest revenue sources. We look at why Chinese Communist Party cadres use it for advertising, while normal citizens are forbidden from accessing it. U.S.-Taiwan relations getting an upgrade. A Senate bill is looking to boost support for the island amid tensions with Beijing. Beijing voicing support for Russia's war on Ukraine. Despite the public remark, it was left out of official meeting record. And a heartbroken father seeking justice for his one-year-old. He says the baby could have survived were it not for China's strict COVID-19 lockdown orders. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A whistleblower says a Chinese spy has been working for Twitter. When he told Twitter executives about the situation, they reportedly appeared unmoved. NTD's Jason Perry has more on the whistleblower's testimony before senators on Tuesday.
What I discovered when I joined Twitter was that this enormously influential company was over a decade behind industry security standards.
Peter Zatko, also known as Mudge, is the former head of security at Twitter. He testified that many Twitter employees had unnecessary access to users' personal information.
And this kind of vulnerability is not in the abstract. It's not far-fetched to say that an employee inside the company could take over the accounts of all of the senators in this room.
Senator Chuck Grassley explained that it was more than just Twitter employees with such access.
Because of Mudge's disclosures, we've learned that personal data from Twitter users was potentially exposed to foreign intelligence agencies.
Senator Mike Lee wanted to know why Twitter hasn't done more to increase data security.
I think they would like to, but they're simply unwilling to put the effort in at the cost of other efforts, such as driving revenue. I'm reminded of one conversation with an executive when I said, I am confident that we have a foreign agent, and their response was, well, since we already have one, what does it matter if we have more? Let's keep growing the office.
NTD received the following reply from Twitter. Twitter's hiring process is independent of any foreign influence, and access to data is managed through background checks and other measures. The Delaware judge overseeing the Elon Musk versus Twitter case ruled last week that Musk can include new evidence related to Zatko's allegations in the trial, which is set to start October 17th. Jason Perry, NTD News.
Zatko also testified about an exchange with the current Twitter CEO about Russia. The CEO asked if it would be possible to punt content moderation and surveillance to the Russian government, and that since they have elections, doesn't that make them a democracy? Twitter is banned in China, but China is one of the social media company's largest revenue sources outside the U.S. This as the Chinese Communist Party allows local authorities to splurge on global advertising on the site. NTD's Jessica Beatty has more on Twitter's dealings with China and the concerns.
Since 2020, Chinese authorities and propaganda offices have flocked to Twitter to buy ads, according to a Reuters review. The ads, often outsourced to Chinese state media, pitched local attractions and achievements to an international audience. Twitter bans political and state media advertising, but allowed these Chinese ads under an exemption. This as Chinese police have increased arrests of citizens who use Twitter to criticize authorities. Twitter whistleblower Peter Zatko's complaint alleges that Twitter execs knew that accepting Chinese money risked endangering users in China. But he says he was told that Twitter was too dependent on revenue from China to do anything other than try to increase it. Twitter denies the accusations. During the hearing, Zatko said employees were disturbed that despite being banned in China, the platform was accepting money from groups associated with the Chinese Communist Party.
A comprehensive overhaul of U.S.-Taiwan policy. That's what one bill vows to do amid heightened threats from China. NTD's Iris Tao has more on the Senate's latest move on the legislation.
With strong bipartisan support, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on Wednesday approved a bill that its architects say could overhaul U.S. policy toward Taiwan. Called the Taiwan Policy Act, the bill in its current form would provide $4.5 billion in defense aid to the democratically ruled island. It would also designate Taiwan as a major non-NATO ally and rename Taiwan's de facto embassy in Washington. Here's Senator Kevin Kramer's take on it.
We have to take strong measures to send strong signals to the leadership in China that we are not going to just sort of roll over or sit back, but rather take their aggression very seriously.
While senators who sponsor the bill have said its goal is not to change U.S.-Taiwan policy, the White House has expressed concerns over the bill amid increasingly tense relations with Beijing.
There are elements of that legislation with respect to how we can strengthen our security assistance for Taiwan that are quite effective and robust, that will improve Taiwan's security. There are other elements that give us some concern.
And what would you say about concerns that it could hurt U.S.-China relations?
Well, I think that the leadership in China have already made that a high priority. And that is, they've chosen to hurt the relationship. They've chosen to be much more aggressive. We can't simply sit back and not respond.
Meanwhile, the U.S. is reportedly weighing sanctions on China to deter it from a threatened invasion of the island. Meanwhile, the future of the Taiwan Policy Act is still uncertain. Upon passage in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, it still needs to pass the whole Senate, not to mention the fact that there's still not a companion bill to it in the House. But Congressman Steve Chabot tells me that he's hopeful that's going to bring real changes.
Well, we're glad that the senators are working on this right now. I would like to see something in the House comparable to this. And I think it's far overdue that we do away with this strategic ambiguity.
Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
In Taiwan's latest effort to rally support, the island's de facto ambassador to the U.S., Xiaobi Kim, gathered dozens of international lawmakers amid tensions with Beijing. The unannounced meeting of about 60 legislators took place Tuesday in Washington, with members from Europe, Asia, and Africa. According to Reuters, the group was expected to sign a pledge to push their governments to adopt greater deterrence against military or other coercive actions by Beijing against Taiwan. It read economic and political measures, including meaningful sanctions, should be considered to deter military escalation and to ensure trade and other exchanges with Taiwan can continue unimpeded. The draft added that their country's ties to Taiwan were not Beijing's to determine, and they would push to increase mutual visits by lawmakers. In response to the gathering, China said Wednesday that striving for Taiwanese independence and separatism was a dead end. Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping has vowed to bring democratically governed Taiwan under Beijing's control. And Russia's invasion of Ukraine has heightened concerns that Beijing could try to take the island by force. Beijing has given its most explicit support to Russia's war in Ukraine so far, coming from China's number 3 official on a visit to Russia last Friday.
We see that the United States and its NATO allies are expanding their presence near the Russian borders, seriously threatening national security and the lives of Russian citizens. We fully understand the necessity of all the measures taken by Russia aimed at protecting its key interests. We are providing our assistance.
Li Zhanshu is the 3rd highest-ranking official in the Communist Party. He visited Moscow last week and met with Putin. The speech marks a turn from Beijing's previous stance. Before, even though the regime avoided condemning Russia for invading Ukraine, no Chinese officials gave public endorsement. The regime also didn't admit that it was providing assistance. At the meeting, Li Zhanshu went on to add,
On the Ukrainian issue, we see how they have put Russia in an impossible situation. And in this case, Russia made an important choice and responded firmly.
The official Chinese readout of the meeting gave no mention of Li's support. Chinese leader Xi Jinping is set to meet with Putin in Kazakhstan this Thursday. The Kremlin said the two would talk about the war in Ukraine. A grieving father suffers over the loss of his one-year-old child. He says the baby could have survived were it not for China's strict COVID-19 lockdown orders. NTD's Juliet Song has more on what happened.
A father is seeking justice for his one-year-old son. The child died after failing to get emergency care under Chinese authorities' strict COVID-19 lockdown orders. The father is from Xinjiang, a region in northwestern China. His city has been put under lockdown for over a month because of local virus cases. Under those orders, residents are banned from leaving their homes. But one day last month, he found his son was falling ill. He called the emergency hotline.
I was told no local hospital will accept patients right now, and the staffer asked me to contact the hospital by myself.
The father called all local hospitals, but none of them were taking patients because of lockdown orders.
At the time, my son was really in critical condition, so I rushed into a car in our local community with my son in my arms. But he died on the way to the hospital, and the hospital didn't even allow us in without a negative test for COVID-19. I tried to force my way into the hospital.
But it was too late. Doctors told the father the child could have survived if they had arrived 10 minutes earlier. Following the baby's death, the father couldn't even find a place to temporarily store his son's body. Hospitals told him they didn't have morgues open. Funeral homes said they were under quarantine. The desperate father had to take his son directly to a crematorium.
I was only allowed to see my son one last time after begging staffers at the crematorium. My son had medical gauze around his head. His eyes and mouth weren't completely shut.
The crematorium told him they didn't even gather the ashes of the child because he was too small. The heartbroken father posted the story on social media. But in less than 3 minutes, local authorities told him to remove his post. The father is now calling for an investigation into those who could be held responsible for his son's death. Juliet Song, NTD News.
In southwest China, protests broke out Monday over lockdown orders in the city of Guiyang. Authorities there are imposing stricter health controls. But the prolonged lockdowns are getting worse, with residents complaining about a lack of food and supplies. As those complaints grow, a number of residents organized and tried to break down a barrier set up by police. But the police sent more control workers onto the scene. Locals said that later, authorities took control of their community the same night, unlocking residential buildings and stationing armed police to guard the gates to the area. Beyond that, another protest sparked after authorities went back on a promise to lift lockdown orders in Shenzhen City. Residents from the Chinese tech hub say they are fed up with what they describe as endless lockdowns. Some of them gathered early on Sunday, asking officials to remove the mandates. According to locals who participated, the crowd saw a turnout of around 20,000 to 30,000 people. One resident explained that an official notice that the lockdown was set to lift on Saturday, but didn't. Video shows many in the crowd chanting, "No lockdowns." To control the situation, authorities dispatched around 200 SWAT members, along with troops in camouflage and joint community defense workers. Authorities did not explain why they extended the city's lockdown. A local Chinese Communist Party leader went to the scene and said the lockdown may end after 2 more rounds of mass COVID-19 testing for locals. That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for more than a year. Here's what to look out for in our second half. A German official vows to fight blackmail from Beijing. The vice chancellor promised no more naivety when dealing with the Chinese Communist Party. And a closer look at the Iran nuclear deal. Is it primed to benefit China if it goes through? The full episode is available on our partner platform at Bok TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. See you tomorrow. World players all vying for control of the Arctic. At stake, billions in resources and strategic holdings for us and our foes. In this special report, we look at the latest geopolitical flashpoint to arrive on the world stage, why control of the Arctic is so contested, and what it means for Americans if we fail.